Welcome to another edition of Ask GC Anything. Coming back faster than Peter Sagan with a win after being chucked off the Tour de France. And due to popular demand, again this week, we are going to extend the rapid fire round. But first off, two slower, longer form questions, the first of which is from Rob123 in the comment section, who asks, how do you guys, the legendary GCN presenters, thanks very much Rob, how do your FTP compare now to back in the day when you were professional? Well Rob, thanks very much for getting in contact. This question did actually get quite a lot of likes in the comment section. Now, Lasty and Dan didn't particularly want to share too much information with us in relation to this particular question. I don't really know why, but Simon was happy to give some information. Now, Si is without doubt the fittest of all the GCN presenters still, and his FTP is only about 5% lower than it was when he was racing as a pro, which I think you'll all agree is mightily impressive, and that actually equates to around 20 watts. So Simon is still pretty fit. Now, in relation to me, well, I do try and keep myself as fit as I possibly can, but due to working at GCN, I can't do anywhere near the amount of miles that I used to, although I do commute to work most days, and a lot of the riding that I actually do is relatively high intensity because my commute is very, very hilly, and I also jump on Zwift and do a lot of work on the home trainer. But I am a fair bit older than Simon, and my FTP from a percentage perspective is actually about 16% down on what it used to be when I was a pro, which equates roughly to about 60 watts. Now, all this talk of FTP, of course, functional threshold power, got us thinking a while back, is it really that important?
FTP is one thing, but we also talk a hell of a lot about power to weight ratio. The higher that ratio is, the better the climber you are going to be. So to take some current examples, like Chris Froome, Alberto Contador and Nairo Quintana have enormously high functional threshold powers, but they also weigh next to nothing. So that's why they are world-class climbers.
Next up, we have this question over on Twitter from Joe DeSapio, who asks, I've never seen my heart rate above 169 beats per minute. Am I super weak, super strong, or is my heart rate monitor broken? Could that be my maximum heart rate? Great question, Joe. Thanks very much for getting in touch. Now, without knowing a little bit more about you, or in fact a lot more about you, it's very, very difficult to answer that question specifically because there are so many different factors at play, like your age, how fit you are, for example, how much riding you do. But the most important thing when considering heart rate and thinking about heart rate is that you shouldn't ever compare it directly to anybody else's. It is completely unique to you. You could react differently to somebody at the same level of fitness with the same kind of training stimulus, for example. Although, of course, there are healthy ballpark resting heart ranges depending on your sex and your age. And of course, resting heart rate is a great indicator of disease, for example, level of fitness and fatigue. So, it still could be that 169 is actually your maximum heart rate. But to get to the nub of that, we need to fully understand how and what method you used to get to that point, i.e., did you ride to exhaustion? Now, what you need to do to establish your maximum heart rate and to be sure of it is follow the handy guide in this video.
Now, although establishing your FTHR is relatively straightforward, you need to bear in mind a few things, a few factors that could change things somewhat. There can be floats and your heart rate could be elevated or sometimes even decreased if you're particularly fatigued. And also, if training in warm and hot conditions, your heart rate could be elevated too by as much as 5 to 10 beats. Now, it also takes a while for your heart rate to increase. So although you're actually riding at FTP from the start of your effort, it could take for between 5 and 15 minutes for your heart rate to catch up with your power.
Okay, rapid fire round. Apparently I did okay last week. Got 11 questions this week. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Matt Geraghty in the comment section, with Froome winning the Tour 4 times over on Osymetric rings, why don't they get more love and acknowledgement? First off, they do take a little bit of a while to get used to. I know a lot of riders have tried them, don't really get on with them too much, and also they're a massive faff for mechanics as well, so they haven't really caught on in the way that perhaps we thought they might. That's my answer to that one. Next up, we have this from Eugene Baczynski. How do you recover morally in terms of your morale after a crash. Being a novice, my wife has recently crashed on descent at 50 k's an hour. Sorry to hear that, mate. Luckily, she didn't break anything, but the crash was quite nasty and she feels very, very anxious. How does she get back into it? Well, what you need to do basically is slowly, incrementally reintroduce yourself or reintroduce your wife back into descending. And what you need to do is not rush it. That's the most important thing. Don't rush and don't ride out of your comfort zone. And also, people in those sorts of situations react generally quite well to kind of some really understanding support. So give your wife a lot of support, get her back on the road, but don't rush things. And also, importantly, remind her of the fact that she descended perfectly well before, and all she needs to do is get back to that point. It just needs patience. Next up is this from Bruno Poop, or Bruno Poipy. Should the UCI change the supply rule? Not drinking or eating isn't healthy. Supplying the last kilometres from stationary people? I don't really think they need to change the rule. Thanks for getting in touch, Bruno, by the way. First 50 Ks, no feeding, plenty of opportunity to put 2 bottles on board, lots of stuff in your back pocket, and then of course no feeding within the last 20 Ks. What you will see the UCI doing, or commissaires with a good backbone and good common sense, is they can actually disregard the rules in the last 20k should the conditions dictate. So in particularly hot conditions, i.e. in a grand tour and a mountaintop finish, they can actually make a decision to actually drop that rule so riders can feed pretty much all the way to the line or within the last 5k. It just takes a little bit of common sense. So I don't actually think the rules need changing. All you need is strong commissaires, race referees with a good bit of common sense. Next up is this from Sean Bailey. How good would Matt Stephens have been if he could have clipped in? I mean, he was national champion without even clipping in. Maybe if he could clip in, he would have won the Tour de France. Not sure about that really, mate, but thank you very much for raising it. And Zwol has got in touch. Hello, do pro cyclists listen to music when riding? Do you? I found drum and bass to be very good training as well as for riding. Personally, I don't listen to music out on the open road, and I'm not sure that many pros do. It's a little bit dangerous, to be perfectly honest with you. You want to hear what's going on around you. So my advice would be, don't listen to music on the road, but if you're on the home trainer indoors, fill your boots, rock and roll, drum and bass. Yeah, I liked a bit of indie, to be perfectly honest with you, back in the day. Next up is this from Michael Green. Seems like many pros and GCN presenters don't wear gloves anymore. What is going on? Are gloves no longer cool? Michael, it's all about the tan. So basically, when we're out training, we want to get a proper tan on our hands, not that kind of weird cyclist tan. But if I was back racing, I would be wearing gloves. The vast majority of riders still wear gloves in racing, but training, it's all about the tan. Next up is this from Bike Boy 1976. What is the best way to break in new cycling shoes? Well, these days, cycling shoes are that well made of a lot of modern synthetic kind of fabrics. You don't really need to break them in like you would kind of a leather shoe, for example. The only breaking in that you kind of need to do is to make sure you do a couple of rides, a couple of longish rides to make sure that the cleat is in the correct position. But in terms of breaking in the actual shoe, you can pretty much ride with them straight away. But my advice would be, if you've got an important sportif event or a race, give yourselves a few days just to make sure the cleat is in the perfect position so you don't get any problems with your knees. Next up is this from Sebas. Hands and arms as relaxed as possible during climbing or pulling back to help. I've heard both. It's a bit of a combination. You need to grip the bars reasonably firmly, but not tightly, just so your arms have a little bit of give and you can pull a little bit, but you certainly shouldn't be gripping the bars knuckle tight. It's just that nice kind of happy medium in between. Tom Blout has got in touch. What happened to say hi on your ride? Well, it's still there, Tom, I hope. I'm encouraging people all the time to say hi on the ride, and quite a lot of the comments on Facebook and Twitter, people are saying they still do it. It hasn't gone away. In fact, let's try and get it trending again. So it's never gone away. Please always say hi on your ride. Brian D has got in touch. Since you've done videos on the neutral support vehicles, why not show us the broom wagon in detail? What an absolutely cracking idea. We'll try and do that at the Vuelta. I think Dan's going out there. Finally, Wes Glassford has said, hey GCN, is there a known cure for the N+1 equation? I'm suffering today. Keep me off the internet. Well, the N+1 equation is always basically wanting a new bike as well as the bike you've already got. Sadly, Wes, there is no known cure. Well, I hope you enjoyed that rapid fire round. Just going to slow things down with one more question before we end this week's show. And this question is from in the comment section from Richie T, who asked, how fast or good do you have to be until you should start worrying about being aero? Well, that is a really, really good question, which I'll answer as best as I can using science. Now, as long as you're moving through the air, aerodynamic drag will account for some proportion of the energy that you need to expend. Although there's no real kind of magic threshold at which aerodynamic drag suddenly appears. But let's take slow speed first. So let's assume that you're traveling on a bike at 10 kilometers an hour, 6 miles an hour, and let's also assume that you're at sea level, there's not much wind, and it's on a pretty smooth road surface. Well, at that sort of speed, aerodynamic drag will account for 25% of your total energy expenditure, and the other 75% will be rolling resistance. So let's speed things up a little bit, again, to put it into some further context. If you're traveling around 40 to 45k an hour, even up to 50k an hour, then you're looking at around 80% of your energy is spent on aerodynamic drag, and then 20% on rolling resistance. And that will of course depend on many, many factors, primarily how aerodynamic you are, how aerodynamic your equipment is, and obviously how small a smaller hole you punch through the air. To put it in even more perspective, when Bradley Wiggins broke the hour record, remember it was 54.526 kilometers in the hour, his total expenditure of energy on aerodynamic drag was 90% and then 10% on rolling resistance. So in answer to your question, aerodynamics really is everything, especially if you want to go faster and more efficiently. And we actually look at this very subject in a bit more detail in this video here.
The difference between simply swapping your jersey and your helmet then was a quite remarkable 1 kilometer per hour nearly at 200 watts. And then at 300 watts and 400 watts, again, the difference went up to nearly 2 kilometers per hour, which is quite remarkable for such a small change, I think.
Well, that's it for another edition of Ask GC Anything. Please keep those questions coming using the hashtag TalkBack down in the comment section or across on social media. Now, if you haven't already subscribed to GCN, it is absolutely free. If you click on the globe, that way you won't miss another video, 2 of which I'm going to point to right now. How about clicking just down here for how to train like a pro with a Cannondale Drapac team, or click just up here for 6 reasons we think you may need a power meter. And don't forget to like and share too.